Rich and I met the very first day of culinary school. There was a financial crisis of 2008. We were like, listen, if either one of us wants to be an entrepreneur right now, we pool our resources together. His family had a little bit of money saved and my family had a little bit of money saved, a nerve-wracking amount, like all of it. We're a couple of kids that have no proven track record. I remember a few landlords taking less money from somebody else to not take a chance on us. Finally, one day he called me and he's like, I'm standing in front of it. And I was like, where are you? He's like, I'm on Mulberry and Prince. I was like, the most bastardized Italian-American street possible? That's where you want to make this break? We're going to fail.
What's up, rich friends? Welcome back to another episode of Networth and Chill with me, your host, Vivian 2, aka your rich BFF and your favorite Wall Street girly. And there is nothing I love more in this world than food. Eating a good meal out. And a lot of that stemmed from a weekly tradition with my husband. When we first started dating each other, we were also just beginning our love affair with New York City. And every single weekend, we'd pick a spot in a new neighborhood we'd never explored before. We'd walk around, we'd get to know each other and share a delicious meal. And over time, we developed a few favorite spots, places that would become, our friends' favorites. And also, growing up, a good meal out was always a way to reward great work or a celebratory moment. But now that I have my own money, sometimes just making it to Friday is reason for celebration. As a Miami and New York City girly, there's no staple bougie restaurant more iconic than Carbone. I can literally taste the cheese and meats that I get before all of my food shows up right now. I'm starting to salivate. It is one of the hottest reservations and has some truly incredible food, and you can't beat it. But the restaurant industry is incredibly cutthroat and challenging. So a major success story like Carbone isn't super common. What makes a good restaurant? How come so many restaurants don't work out? What dishes are worth the money and what should you skip because you could maybe make it home? We're about to find out. Today, I'm so excited to be chatting with the chef and mind behind Carbone, the namesake, the co-owner of Major Food Group, and the founder of Carbone Fine Food, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mario Carbone.
Hi, how are you?
So good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with a really quick icebreaker.
Yep.
It can't be anything you make.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite food?
It can't be anything I make.
No, it has to be another restaurant or something you can buy somewhere else.
Donuts.
Donuts?
Yeah.
Really?
Love a donut.
Okay, what kind?
Donuts.
What do you mean?
I love all donuts.
All donuts. Jelly-filled, cream-filled, the crullers even count?
Oh, yeah.
Why? Is that like, there's like a childhood story there?
I love sweet pastries. Not that I eat them often, but things that I love. I love sort of the sweet breakfast pastries.
Okay.
It's definitely an Italian thing.
Mm-hmm.
That you sort of start your morning that way, which is horrendous.
Yeah, glycemic index immediately shoot through the sky.
I do love a breakfast pastry, and I love donuts.
Wow. I never would have guessed that, but I love to know that about you. I want to rewind the tape just a little bit. These days, you are this super accomplished chef and restaurateur, but I want to know, what was your very first job in the food industry and how much were you making at the time?
My very first job was minimum wage. The year was probably 1995 or 1996.
I was one.
That's cute. 1995, Queens, New York. I was making minimum wage, which I think at the time was $5.25 maybe an hour. Something like that.
Yeah.
$5 an hour. And my first job was actually at a local restaurant, not that close to my house, but on the Queens, Long Island border. So I had a little bit of commuting to do. And it was on the raw bar. So my job, which I had no idea how to do, the first job they gave me was kind of shucking clams and oysters and working this like raw bar section of what was kind of a buffet, part of the appetizer section of the menu. So I had people coming up to the raw bar. And if you ever tried to open a raw clam, it's really difficult to do. So I've been shown once, I'm trying to figure it out. And you've got like this big guy in front of you just waiting for you to put one down. and you're like struggling and it takes like 10 minutes to get one open. You finally open and you put it down and eats it immediately and it just stands there. You're like, this is going to be a long night, you know?
Oh, no.
But working the Raw Bar in Queens, New York on Northern Boulevard for $5 an hour.
Did you ever get hurt? Because shucking oysters and clams,
Yeah,
that's
I
kind
have
of
a
like
scar
dangerous.
here actually from years later, driving an oyster knife into my hand. One of the few scars I have. This was many years later, but opening an oyster and it slipped and drove the knife into my hand.
Oh.
So yeah.
Oh man. Did you at least get the rest of the day off?
No, I just kind of like bandages up and kept going.
And just kept going.
Definitely got infected. But, you know, you just kind of rub some dirt in it and keep going.
Yeah. The guy standing in front of you wanted more clams. Hurry up.
I'm bleeding my clams.
Yeah, don't bleed in his clams. Amazing. And growing up in New York, obviously in Queens, New York is so diverse. Obviously, you've got like the billionaires living south of Central Park. You've got these communities of immigrants. Like, what was your family's relationship with money and New York City like? Like, what did your parents do?
My dad worked 7 days a week for most of the year. He had 2 jobs. He was a foreman in a company that was called Brooklyn Union Gas Company, which is now, I think, National Grid, a gas supplying company. And he was a foreman in the street. So I remember, vividly as a little kid watching him like super bundle up for these winter days because he worked outside, and thinking like, he's going to stand outside all day. That's crazy.
Ugh.
And then on the weekends, him and my uncle had a landscaping job. So the truck was in the driveway all week. And then on the weekends, when myself and my cousin were old enough, which was still really young, they started taking us to work. So I think my very first job was probably working landscaping on the weekends with my dad. And my mom, aside from both raising myself and my sister, was also a secretary at a like local chiropractic office. And she would bring me to work also. And I would work and like do like really annoying like filing jobs that I hated doing. So I worked with both of them a little bit when I was young, like pretty young.
Did you learn anything from their jobs that you didn't want to do boring desk jobs or that you didn't want to do something that was outside?
I never looked at their jobs in any sort of consideration of it being something that I would do. It wasn't like something that I thought about. I think what it was, I think I always wanted to be somewhat self-sufficient about money, and I wanted to have my own money, and I wanted to get things and go out and hang out. And I think really early on, they instilled the idea that, well, you got to do something for that. Like
you got to earn it.
You don't get that. So I was always like, okay, cool. What do I got to do? Rake the leaves, take the garbage out. Like, what do I got to do? Go to work with dad, go to work with mom. And then when I was old enough, I actually probably wasn't old enough, but I started working in like, I knew that I had a love for restaurants, and I started working at restaurants like after school and on weekends. So I was always a busy bee because I guess I kind of wanted to be somewhat financially self-sufficient.
Yeah. So you mentioned you worked in a couple of these small kitchens, but then you get a degree from the CIA, which everybody should know stands for Culinary Institute of America. There are no, there's no guns happening here. But you're probably best known for being the chef and co-owner of Carbone because it's your last name. But that's not actually the first restaurant you guys opened. You and your business partner, Rich Teresi, opened Teresi Italian Specialties. One, did you guys rock, paper, scissors on whose last name got to be the restaurant title? And 2, like, how did you do that? Did you go and, shake down the money tree from friends and family? Did you go to investors?
Yeah. So Rich and I met the very first day of culinary school. We were 18 years old in 1998, and we were at orientation, and we just happened to be close to each other in a room full of kids. And I think I knew that he was from New York and I was from New York, and we just wound up meeting. And so we met the very first day of culinary school. And through the years, friends in, different circles, and we would hang out. And then ultimately we wound up both working in New York City post-graduation together, and then eventually becoming roommates. And that's where we sort of became really tight. I had an apartment and I needed a roommate. And then through living together, we both were sort of heading towards the part of our careers where we had spent probably 10 plus years working for other chefs, great chefs. Rich had worked all through France. I had worked in Italy. He had worked for Danielle. I had worked for Mario. And we were both getting really antsy about being our own entrepreneurs. And when we lived together, the idea was that what we were doing when we were living together was we were constantly bouncing ideas off each other, because we assumed that he would do something and I would do something. And he'd be like, yeah, I'm thinking about this. I'd be like, yeah, I'm thinking about this. And at no point did we consider working together.
Yeah.
And then there was a sort of financial crisis of 2008 where anything that we had thought of doing or getting capital or investors dries up really quickly. But we were still really ready to not have a boss. We were ready to take that next step. And I think we were having like lunch or something one day, and I don't know who came up with the idea, but we're like, listen, if either one of us wants to be an entrepreneur right now in this climate, I think the only way we're going to do that is if we pool our resources together and do this together, because neither one of us is really in a position to make this happen right now. So we sort of agreed on that, and his family had a little bit of money saved and my family had a little bit of money saved, like a really nerve-wracking amount, like all of it, like whatever we have saved, we're going to roll into our child's dream. And then we found a couple of investors. They were like friends of the family or a friend that Rich grew up with, to give us a little bit of money. So we had a couple $100,000, and then we started looking for spaces, and we looked all over New York for spaces. And we knew enough that we wanted something that told a story. We weren't really sure what the exact story we were telling, but we knew it needed to be something that felt authentic to us. So we looked at a bunch of places. We had a few near misses. I remember a few landlords taking less money from somebody else to not take a chance on us.
Why?
Because we're a couple of kids that have no proven track record, and that we're gonna fail.
Okay.
And then finally one day he called me and he's like, I'm standing in front of it. And I was like, where are you? He's like, I'm on Mulberry and Prince. I was like, Mulberry Street? Like the most like bastardized Italian-American street possible? That's where you want to make this break? And he's like, this is it. And I ran from our apartment, which wasn't far, to that space. And it was a jean shop, a really ugly jean shop. But it had been a restaurant in prior life. And it was across the street from where John Gotti had his social club. And it was just north of that Little Italy, to where we're like, maybe we can just kind of make our own thing here. And the landlord took a chance on us, and we had no idea how to build a restaurant. And we just sort of took it one challenge at a time. I think ignorance is bliss there. Had we known how difficult it would have been, it wouldn't have stopped us, but it was better not knowing, and just hit one wall at a time and break it down and figure this thing out. And his best friend's father was a contractor, and he came in and he helped us build this thing. My dad built the shelves on the walls. Everyone pitched in.
That's so
until
wonderful.
We finally got it open.
What do you think was the most challenging thing you were unprepared for as a business owner?
I think that there's a weight of taking somebody's money that hits you, because we were actually like also the cashiers. So we were doing everything. I was answering the phone. I was making coffee. I was making change, and I remember going through the transaction of the first few sales, and I remember almost being embarrassed to charge somebody, for making this food, and being like, oh, it's $6 a pound, like.
Why?
And I don't know. There was always like a feeling of there was a weight to taking somebody's money that I don't forget. But we knew enough that, and to Rich's credit, he always said, like, let's just start as a sandwich shop. Let's do something really, really simple and humble. It'll get enough traction to keep the business coming. We knew we had to keep the lights on. Just keep it going for long enough, and good things will happen. And then after a couple of months, we introduced dinner, which was just a chalkboard menu, because we didn't have the space or the money to bring in enough ingredients to hand out a whole menu. So we were like, okay, let's just do one menu. We only have to bring in a few ingredients, and if no one comes, then we didn't lose that much money. So it was a chalkboard menu where you basically only chose meat or fish, and everything else was predetermined. And that's how Teresi started.
I love that. And from there, you actually go on to open my husband's favorite fast casual sandwich spot, Parm.
Yep.
When we first started dating, we lived directly next to Ruby Rosa.
Mm-hmm.
So you know the block.
Yeah, busy block.
We could literally like look across and be like, how long do you think the wait is going to be? And then run down and get sandwiches. It's the most delicious chicken parm.
Thank you.
And ultimately, you decide to close Teresi Italian Specialties and then opened your now probably most famous restaurant, Carbone. Like, what was the calculus of opening Parm, closing Teresi, opening Carbone? Like, what was the decision behind, like, what restaurants are we going to keep open and what are we going to close and what are we going to new open?
So Teresi didn't really close. It closed to customers for a while. We had the space for a decade. It was open, I don't know, probably 3 or 4. It was open in probably at least 4 years to the public. And then it closed and it became basically our test kitchen and lab. It was like a little Wonka space where it seemed closed to the outside world, but it was very busy inside with chefs. And that was a big boom period for the company, where not only was Carbone opening, we had just gotten a bid. We had just won a bid for a project on the High Line, and we were doing that, and we were about to open Dirty French. So we had more than we could really handle. So we decided to turn Teresi into the test kitchen, and it had kind of run its course in a really like fast and hot way. It had gone from this very like simple thing to this really elaborate tasting menu, and it kind of burned us out for a little while. So that's what that space became, and it spawned like I remember all the Carbone R&D happening there. All of our early dishes. The first time we made veal parm and rigatoni and all that was there. But we had always dreamed of building the restaurant that would become Carbone. Sort of love letter to the old school Italian American restaurant that we had grown, both he and I had grown up with. Jeff grew up with that style of restaurant too. So that was always something we talked about, and we found the perfect space for it, and we're like, this is it. It's the time to do it.
Yeah. So you mentioned R&D. Obviously, when it comes to high-end restaurants, fine dining, it's a lot more than just, okay, let me circle A through D and pick a thing, and then suddenly we have a menu. Yeah. Can you explain to me, like, so there is a farm somewhere that is growing tomatoes, and then somehow I walk into your restaurant, I sit down, there is a certain type of music playing, the waiter is dressed a certain way, there's a certain plate put in front of me, and then they hand over a plate of pasta that has tomato in it. How did that tomato get onto my plate? Or like, what is the process of like thinking about the restaurant R&D process?
So it's theater to me. It's a very elaborate story that's played out in real life. It is a stage that is set. You start with the script. What's the story we're telling? What's the style of restaurant? If you're using Carbone, the script would be, this is this Italian-American fine dining restaurant set to the late 1950s. It's a first-generation Italian-American story. And as you put those things down on paper, it's going to start to define some of the decisions you're going to make. Okay, well, if it's set to that period, then what would the music be? Okay, well, if it's set to that period, what would the uniforms look like? Okay, well, if it's set to that period, then what would, and you can start to answer those questions as you sort of elaborate your script. And then the show, when the space is finally done, then the show is ready to be put on. And it's the closest thing to theater in the sense that every night at the exact same time, we put on the exact same show for a different audience. And you want it to be as believable as possible. And I think believable comes in all those details. If you inundate the guest with all of those decisions, if you've asked that question through that script of hundreds, if not thousands of choices that you've made to put this thing together, including the food that you've chosen, I think at the end, what you have is a really transportive experience. You believe you're in 1958 on Thompson Street. Yeah. Because we've gone through the work and the effort to put it all through that prism.
Through the process of crafting that story, was there any part of the story that was so much more expensive than you thought? Just like surprise wine glasses or something?
Expensive. I mean, It is it is a very expensive business. I think that it's difficult for people that are not in the industry to wrap their brains around all of the line items,
Yeah.
all of the variabilities. Um, it's a very old business in the sense that
Yeah.
it needs a huge amount of manpower. It hasn't really been disrupted by technology or AI or any of
Mhm.
that, right? You need about 100 people to work in a restaurant, one restaurant. So we have well over 5,000 people that work at Major Food Group. It's a person intense business. And then you start to get into the hundreds or thousands of things that go into the setting of the stage, and all of those things cost something. Some of them can be reused, and some of them cannot be, like food.
Yeah.
Um, and then trying to order appropriately, making sure that there's no waste in the restaurant, buying of the best ingredients, especially if you're talking about fine dining. Then you add a whole nother layer of cogs
Yeah.
that go to fine dining that don't
Yeah.
exist in a regular restaurant. So Carbone was our first real taste of fine dining. We got 3 stars from the New York Times, and to do that, you need to add a certain comfort, a certain level of luxe to the experience that costs more than it would if you had a trattoria style bare
Mhm.
table wood table restaurant, which was kind of close to what the original Teresi was. So that was our first taste of the cost of fine dining. But we had come from fine dining. We were familiar with it.
Right.
It wasn't new. It was new to us as entrepreneurs. It was not new to us as chefs and
Yeah.
and being, through osmosis of all the years of all the fine dining, knowing what
Yeah.
this room needs to feel like.
You're formal educated
Yeah,
chefs.
yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of expensive, speaking of costs that go into things that people do know about, eggs are now $8,000. Yeah, talk to me. Like with certain foods and inputs, just publicly headlines,
Mhm.
like we know eggs are very expensive
Yep.
right now. Certain ingredients are getting more and more expensive. Like, how do you guys manage for that?
So I think that we've made a pledge to our customers, certainly in let's call it the fine dining portion of the portfolio of the restaurant group. I believe that we've made a pledge to them that we're going to always fight to have the very best ingredients in the
Mhm.
world every day.
Yeah.
Um, I believe that they understand that. And what we are not going to do in a moment of inflation, tariffs, whatever's about to hit us, what we're not going to do is start making compromises.
Mm.
I'm not going to say, okay, well, I really want to buy that egg, but we're going to buy this egg because the pasta's got to be this cost. That's not what we're going to do,
Mhm.
right? We're going to continue to go after the ingredients that our customers are familiar with, making the quality of dishes that we are, and we're going to wind up passing along that cost, and things are going to get more expensive. But I believe if I had to interview all of my customers,
Yeah.
that by a wide margin, they're going to say, "I want the dish the way it is."
Yeah.
So that's the pledge that we continue to make to them.
There's nothing more hateful for me than when I go somewhere and I have a dish that I'm obsessed with and I love, and then I go back and I'm like, they changed the recipe. I know they changed the recipe. Like I'm not, a chef. I'm not even a professional food taste tester, but I'm like, I know you changed the recipe.
Consistency is the single most difficult thing that we battle.
Yeah.
Not just us, but restaurants battle every single day.
Yeah. All right, you hear that, guys? We're not losing the Parmigiano Reggiano wheel.
No, no, no.
Oh, we
Never,
can't.
never.
So I think I heard a rumor on some cooking shows that restaurants actually notoriously do not make as much money on food as people think, but they make it up in other ways. So often in beverage, often in like desserts,
Mhm.
but like, is that true?
Desserts, no. Desserts are expensive.
Okay.
And often desserts are something that are given away sometimes.
Mm.
If you've waited for a table, if you're celebrating something, if you're a regular. So desserts is often very low on that list. Alcohol is great, right? Alcohol
Yeah.
is a great business to be in. One, it's non-perishable.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah. Two, there's very small amount of labor involved in it, right?
Right.
You have a bartender, or you have a sommelier, or you have a waiter, but you don't have prep cooks and dishwashers,
Yep.
and you don't have ingredients that are going to go bad. You don't have nearly as much variability in that business, so certainly the margins are better on something like that. So alcohol is a great business to be in, and thankfully we are in that game. And we do look at where regionally we can you want to look at sort of the analytics behind dining out and what cities, what do those check average look like. A city like I get inundated with requests for Los Angeles, but Los Angeles traditionally has a lower check average because they're lighter drinkers, because they're drivers. They're super health conscious. They don't drink as much. They're driving most times. So the alcohol sale portion of that check in Los Angeles is smaller. So that's always, you have to look at that in the equation of, okay, can I afford the rent on this restaurant if my check average was here, but it's going to be there?
I never thought about that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You're obviously thinking about a bunch of things that I'm not thinking about. And frankly, a lot of newbie restaurant openers are not thinking about. The restaurant industry is notoriously challenging. A lot of restaurants go out of business. People lose money. Like, why? I know that's kind of like a loaded question.
Yeah, it is a loaded question, but a few assumptions I would make. It's a very fun business, as difficult as it is. So all too often, I think you wind up with restaurateurs that are not lifers. They're there because they love to host. Maybe they have some money to invest and they've decided that they want to expand on their hosting at home and they're going to create a restaurant. Those two things are wildly different. And I think sometimes we get, because the restaurant industry looks as fun as it is, and it is an amazing and fun industry, it can be misleading to those who are not totally prepared to enter it. Certainly, it's an industry that has a huge amount of comps and choose your genre, choose your cuisine, choose your price point. You're going to have, the customer are going to have in a city, especially in a city like New York or Miami, you're going to have a million choices, right?
Yeah.
I'm an Italian-American restaurant serving meatballs. Do you know how many of me there are?
Yeah.
So what's going to make you special? Where are you going to stand out? And then, so then as restaurateurs start to think that and ask themselves those questions, sometimes they wind up trying to latch on to things that are fads. I'm going to stand out this way. And those are not sustainable. They're in all likelihood, they're not going to last. You're going to sign a 10 or 15-year lease. How can you possibly stay relevant for that long?
Yeah.
These are really, they're very heavy things to take on when you take them on. I'm going to rent this giant space for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's going to be just as busy when I open as it is in 10 years from now. Like that's
tough.
Almost an impossibility.
Right. Wow. All right. I do want to pivot. We've talked a lot about your restaurants, but for the folks who don't live in New York or Miami or Vegas, you also make some really incredible food staples at grocery stores, your sauces that people can then go home and create the Carbone experience no matter where they live. What made you want to do that? Because you've sold an incredible, I'm looking here, 20 million jars of Carbone Fine Food sauce since launching in COVID. Like, with 10 million in 2024 alone. Like, what made you want to jar your secret sauce?
Well, we thought we had something. I mean, when we realized we got to a place where we were starting to affect, or the Carbone brand was starting to permeate pop culture, we thought that we had something that could not only be successful on store shelves in cities that we were present in, but we thought that we were actually going to start to make some dividends and some dents across the country. Because of course, there's only going to be so many restaurants, right? So we can only feed so many people. Only so many people can experience Carbone. So how do we bottle something up and give them even a small taste of what happens in these restaurants? And I think when we got to the point where we were confident in how long we had been around, that people were beginning to hear this and know this brand, and we could actually maybe make a thing of this across the country. And then we had, the blessing that we got there was we were able to hire an incredible CEO who had run Rails for many years. And there was the last piece of confidence we needed. That was like, okay, when we found Eric, we were like, oh, okay, now we definitely have to do this, because we probably didn't have enough of our own time to tackle this on our own with all the restaurants going. But as soon as we met Eric, now we have something. We should definitely do this.
What would you say, like, were the financial lessons you learned from scaling that business versus the restaurant business? Obviously, it sounded like, manpower, hiring an expert was important, but any other good lessons?
I mean, yeah, having the expert was the linchpin of this entire
Yeah.
thing because watching Eric work, watching the way that he considers buying glass in futures, making sure that the olive oil price is where it's going to need to be this whole coming year,
Mhm.
making sure that we're stocked up on X, Y, and Z just in case that this tariff hits or that
Yeah.
happens. So watching Eric work and having somebody who's a lifer in this industry has helped us avoid mistakes that we certainly would have made because it's just a discipline that's just so foreign to us, right? Even though we make sauce, of course, even though it's the Carbone brand, it's a completely different discipline.
Yeah.
So we've been blessed to have him help us navigate through what would have been a very difficult learning. I mean, we would have gotten through it, but I don't think at the speed that we're
Mm.
operating, the speed that we're growing, no chance we would have been able to do that without Eric.
Yeah. These days, what's more lucrative? Running the actual restaurants or having your Carbone Fine Foods jars of sauce and other, store shelf items?
Well, we're still definitely a restaurant company first.
Yeah.
And that portfolio is still first and foremost for us. But at the pace that sauce is growing, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And now that it's in as many stores as it is, it's in 25,000 stores.
Yeah.
It can compound itself. So the speed's really going to exacerbate
Mhm.
now that we have the scale and the
Mhm.
buying scale that we have. So to watch it grow, it's certainly grown 100 times faster than anything brick and mortar.
Mm.
So that's a really amazing thing to watch happen. Now that the first few years, getting our name out there, getting the slotting, getting all the stores to take us, and now we're at this great place where we're basically at mass. We're in almost all the stores, and now you can now worry about velocity or work on velocity and marketing and all of that. So the speed of sauce has been incredible to watch, but we're still a restaurant portfolio.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that may answer my next question, but aside from your restaurants, you've got members clubs like ZZ's, retail, Our Lady of Rocco, publishing. You created an Asaline book,
Mhm.
and real estate, Villa Miami.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to ask you, of the things that you've created, is your favorite kid?
Well, I would say the restaurant that I'm most proud of is the grill in the Seagram building.
I've been trying to get in.
Like my own personal pride.
Yeah.
I think that
It's not the
that's
one where your last name is the title?
no.
Wow.
I mean, I love that. I mean, of course, you're choosing children now, but there was something about that moment and the difficulties of taking over this legendary place. Us being really young still at the time. Definitely some questions out there from industry leaders
Mhm.
of whether or not that was the right choice. Did they put it in the right hands? To go through that whole process and put forth what I think was at the time, and I still look back at it as probably our tightest product. The best, I think the best restaurant we've ever built. In the face of all that, so every time I look at that restaurant, I walk in that restaurant, I have tremendous pride in it. So if I had to choose a favorite child, I would choose the grill in the Seagram building.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not the kid I thought, but
That's
it's
the
a great
one.
answer.
Yeah.
I love that. Major Food Group has now expanded your restaurant empire to 50 locations worldwide, with 10 more coming this year. You mentioned, having to be really thoughtful in LA because the check size is smaller. People have to drive. They don't drink as much. How do you go about choosing when and where to open another location?
So sometimes we're like just looking at a few of the opportunities that are coming up this year. Like we're building our third and fourth restaurants in Las Vegas. So we have all the analytics from our existing places in Las Vegas that say this is a great. We're doing incredibly well here. We have the best partners at MGM. The restaurants are run really well. New spaces have become available. Of course. We can't say yes fast enough. We love that market. Then there's markets like London we're going to for the first time that we've always dreamed of being at. And it's taken this many years because we knew that we only had a really small bullseye of where this restaurant could be within the Mayfair section of London. So we had some near misses, But finally, a space became available inside the new Rosewood Hotel in the old American Embassy. That was just a dream come true. So we fought hard to get that space, and now it's becoming a reality. And I think that that'll be the Trojan horse that will lead a London growth. Carbone will go first, and then through that, you'll see more of the portfolio come over in London, because that's been a city that we've always wanted to be a part of. Then as you continue to kind of go east, we're opening in Dubai for the first time this year. We know that that's, we're very confident that's going to be successful, because we have colleagues in that city that do really well. We have a lot of friends in that city. We do business in the Middle East already. There's tons of connectivity to our existing database of VIPs and things like that. So we're really, and it's again, just like being part of the MGM family, choosing partners when it's going to be a managed restaurant and not an owned and operated restaurant, choosing partners that you believe are going to uphold the standards as well as if you did it yourself. And that's certainly true at MGM. And in Dubai, you're in a hotel, which is the Royal Atlantis, that could not be any nicer. It cannot be run any smoother. The level of detail that they operate at, you're like, after spending time with them and at the property, you're like, of course, this is the right answer. Yeah. So sometimes the answers reveal themselves, and sometimes it's something that it's on our board, like London. Someday we're going to get there. Someday we're going to get there, and then finally, it comes true.
You say it's important to find a good partner. What's like your top 3 things you look for in a partner?
I think you want like-mindedness, people that are running places in their home districts, whether it's our partners in Hong Kong or MGM, that run them in ways that are spiritually aligned. They treat the restaurants in a similar manner. And then I think it would go to kind of personnel. What do their existing staff look like? What's their infrastructure look like? Can they handle taking on our product? And I would say those are the 2 big ones. What do their existing properties look like? How are they run? Are they run in a similar manner that we would be proud of? And can their personnel withstand taking on our brands? Do they have the bandwidth? And do they have their hands on spaces that are desirable for us, right? So then it's that whole Venn diagram of like, can we meet in the middle here? And thankfully, we've had amazing partners so far across the globe.
Yeah. So we're sort of coming to the end of our time, but I can't let you go without asking, give me the story of the spicy rigatoni. Everybody has to ask you this, right? Like, this is the thing that when I went to Carbone, I was like, don't you dare let me leave without getting this and putting it on my Instagram. Everybody has to know I ate here. That's like the signature, right?
So spicy rigatoni was one of the last dishes to be put on the menu. We had zero idea that we were doing anything of great note at the time. I remember talking to Rich and Jeff. We were finalizing the menus. We had gone through tons of tastings of all the things we thought were really critically important to making great. And I looked at the menu. I remember looking at the menu and feeling like the pasta section needed, like, it wasn't totally balanced. It needed another vegetarian pasta. That was my first thought. So then I started working backwards. Okay, well, what would be a vegetarian pasta that would fit with the rest of them on this menu? And then I think as a bit of a joke, I said a la vodka, because the dish is kind of a bit of a joke.
Wait, why?
Well, it's just kind of one of those things that's been bastardized, and it's just it's kind of this creamy pink sauce that was really for kids and like pizzerias. But it was such a popular and well-known name that I liked looking at it on the menu. So we're like, okay, well, whatever. We take flyers on ideas all the time. Make it, see what happens. And we went about making it. And I think I don't know if it was the first time, but I don't think it took very many times before we made something that we thought, this is really tasty. Yeah. It's good enough to be on the menu. It rounds the menu out really well. I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
Cut to, we open the restaurant, and I guess that dish fell in a really popular place because it was vegetarian. It was spicy. It played really well if you were getting seafood pastas or meat pastas. Everything is very shareable. So it wound up getting on a lot of tables early. And there's definitely something to the chemical reaction of the dish. Not just that dish, but like creamy spicy. Like think of like Nobu rock shrimp. Like there's a chemical reaction to creamy spicy. Think about like your halal cart and white sauce, hot sauce. There's something there, and it is an addictive thing. The noodle is not a dry pasta, and it's not really a fresh pasta. It's somewhere in between. It's, the category is kind of called extruded. So it's this chewy pasta that almost gives you like a Korean dumpling dough kind of reaction to it. So the chewiness, the creamy, the spicy, the sweet onions, like it was a chemical thing. But at the time when we made it, we didn't think much of it. We just thought that this was good enough to fill out the menu. Menu done, check. Let's open this restaurant.
Yeah. So it wasn't going to be your headliner.
Well, I had no idea. I mean, why would it be?
Yeah.
Like
of
why,
all the other
why
things.
of all the things we put all this effort into, like why would this be the one? Like I think it'll be good. It'll be good on the menu. It'll be good for vegetarians.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Wow. And then it ended up becoming one of the stars.
But you don't know. You don't get to know.
Well, speaking of like getting to know, like if you weren't a chef, what would you do?
I don't know. I'm not very good at anything else. I was definitely not scholastic. Formal education was not for me. Major university was not for me. I'm not quite sure what I would have done. And I think that really motivated me once I realized, as I was heading toward culinary school, that this might be your only chance at something, you don't have a lot of things to fall back on. There's no great grades. You don't really have any other interests. Certainly now I have more hobbies, but as an 18, 19-year-old, there was a scared straight that like, you should probably put everything you got into this.
Yeah.
Because if this doesn't work, I'm not sure what it's going to be.
Sometimes you make the best decisions when you only have one decision to make.
100%. Had I been even 10% smarter, I might have gotten into a school after high school that would have been compelling enough to not take culinary seriously. But I didn't. So I was like, what do I got to lose? Might as well take this shot.
Yeah. Might as well be a chef.
Go be a chef.
Become a celebrity chef and it'll be easy.
What could happen?
What's the worst that could happen?
What's the worst that could happen?
Well, it's obviously very clear that you love your job. You love what you've built. You've created a really amazing life for yourself that you're very passionate about. Do you think you'll ever retire?
I don't know. Restaurateurs don't really retire. That's the thing. I don't know of any that have ever retired.
You don't ever want to kick up and like sit by the pool and like...
Well, the thing about restaurateurs is that either they all closed and it's over.
Yeah.
Or they've been lucky enough to pass it on to another generation. There's not a lot of examples out there for just kind of it's time. Let's have a retirement party and let's call it. So I'm not sure. I don't think about it really that often. I think we're lucky enough to be at the point in the company where we all get to do just the things that we're really passionate about. It's a beautiful process. And if I didn't do this, I would be a pretty restless, intolerable human being, just alone with my thoughts. I don't know if retirement is for me, but maybe ask me in 10 years.
All right. We'll circle back in 10 years. Last question. What can people expect next from you? And what are you most excited about for the next 5 years?
I want to see how we can affect the word hospitality. Not only does that mean traditional sort of four walls of restaurants, but I think we're at a place where we're old enough as a company and as a team, but still young enough to take chances and see what's out there for us within the world of hospitality. So that's, to your point earlier, residences, it's clubs, it's hotels, it's communities. I'm not sure what it could be. I like the fact that I'm not totally sure, but I'm really confident in us as a team, and I think that we should continue to sort of take chances, keep building restaurants because that's the core of the business. But I think looking at the word hospitality and asking ourselves, where can we touch this and can we affect it in a great way? And if the answer is yes, then let's give it a shot.
I feel like that's the perfect way to end our interview. Mario, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody listening where they can find you, find your food, and visit your restaurants.
I'm hard to find. I'm intentionally hard to find. So don't try to find me.
Okay.
The
social
restaurants,
media lists.
Yeah, I have them on social media, but don't reach out. I'm there for research purposes only. And we have restaurants, across the globe. I mean, come see us. When I'm in New York, you can find me often at these days at our club Zzz's in Hudson Yards. I spend a great deal of my time there with the team there. And when I'm in Miami, we have our test kitchen here in Miami where I work with the chefs every day. And then you'll see me often as a customer in the restaurants. I think at this point, that's one of the most important parts of my job is to be on the other side. Let the team do their thing and then go in and be a customer and see if I have any notes sitting on the other side.
Do you wear like a fake mustache or something to pretend so they're like, oh my God, that's the boss?
No, but maybe I should look into that.
Yeah. Glasses, mustache.
Glasses and mustache.
You got to hide. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Networth and Chill, part of the Vox Media Podcast Network. If you liked the episode, make sure to leave a rating and review and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Got a burning financial question that you want covered in a future episode? Write to us via podcast@yourrichbff.com. Follow Networth and Chill Pod on Instagram to stay up to date on all podcast-related news. And you can follow me at yourrichbff for even more financial know-how. See you next week. Bye!